Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Wilhelm II and his chancellors. So we're going to be continuing from the fall of Bismarck. So as we know, Wilhelm II takes the German throne in 1888, following his father Frederick, who only ruled for 99 days before dying of his throat cancer. So Wilhelm was 27 when he took the throne, and it really shows in the way he was ruling Germany. He was quite childish, and he was very prone to outbursts of anger when things didn't go his way, which unfortunately for Kaiser Wilhelm II was quite a lot. And he was nicknamed the Reisekaiser, or traveling emperor, as he spent most of his time, in fact, like Tsar Nicholas II, with his family and especially on his yacht. And remember, these are yachts in the sort of early 20th century, which are essentially cruise ships. Now, Wilhelm II wanted to be seen as an independent ruler, and as we know, he dismisses Bismarck in 1890 due to a multitude of reasons. But the big one, personally, for Wilhelm II is he wants to make himself as his own character. He wants to be his own man. He doesn't want to be in the shadow of his, Wilhelm I and of Bismarck. And so his first chancellor is Caprivian. He's chancellor from 1890 to 1894. Now, in the German history for AQA, A-level history, the main importance is just knowing the date range and what they did. So previous chancellor from 1890 to 1894, so he doesn't last very long. And he immediately begins the new course. And Caprivi's new course essentially is an end to the anti-socialist laws. He gives more influence on policy making to the ministers. He reduces tariffs, and he does some more social reforms like, recognizing unions. Now, Caprivi was supported by the Liberals and Zentrum, naturally because he was, if you look at the laws he was passing, very sort of liberal-like and, very much sort of pro-Zentrum style stuff. But he was also surprisingly supported by the industrialists, especially that's quite surprising considering he wanted the unions back, and the working class, naturally. But he lacked the support of the Conservatives and the Camarillo. Now, the Camarillo was a group of people who surrounded the Kaiser, and they were essentially advice makers. Think of them as basically the Kaiser's friend group, essentially. They tell him what they, want they think and what he should do. And the issue with Camarillo is they're naturally very conservative. They're not really sort of in any other style because they're all Junkers. And Caprivi's kind of downfall begins in 1893. So he agrees to reduce military service to 2 years and have the budget reviewed every 5 years so that the army could be increased by 84,000 men. And that goes through with the Reichstag. So the Kaiser gets his army increased. Now, when I say the military service is reduced by 2 years, you've got to remember in Germany at this period, military service is required. You have to do it. And so essentially you do 2 years military service and then you'd be moved to reserves where you can be called up on in times of war if they need you. However, it's seen as a humiliation to the Conservatives because obviously, as we know, they, like Bismarck, wanted it to be an unlimited army budget, but then it got septennial laws, so every 7 years. Now, the Caprivi found the Kaiser very hard to work with because the Kaiser wanted a lot more influence. He didn't really like Caprivi because Caprivi was also not handling the socialist situation very well. And so Caprivi resigned himself. He wasn't kicked out, he chose to resign. So the chancellor after Caprivi was Hohenlohe, and he was chancellor from 1894 to 1900. Now, Hohenlohe was chosen because he was no political threat to Wilhelm II. He was part of the Camarillo, he didn't really care much, and he was nicknamed the Straw Doll by Wilhelm II simply because he was going to kind of let Wilhelm II use him the way he wanted. Now, Hohenlohe did try to stop the socialist growth with two bills, the 1894 Subversion Bill and the 1899 Anti-Union Bill. Now, you can guess by the fact that he used two bills, both failed. Wilhelm II also turned in 1899 to his Minister for the Interior to try and get a law passed to arrest people who went on strike and were deemed a threat to the state, but that also failed. So Wilhelm essentially cannot do anything about socialism. And when Wilhelm took the throne, he thought to himself that he could deal with socialism by making himself loved. That doesn't really go. Now, at this point, Wilhelm starts to focus on Weltpolitik, which is his big plan to essentially get Germany to have a colonies overseas. He wants a big navy. He passes two navy bills, and they begin working on ships like, the dreadnoughts, so the Kaiser class and things like that, stuff that would oppose, the British Navy, because the Kaiser at this point sees himself as the dominant military force on land, and he believes that he should be the new Britain, essentially. He believes Germany should take over from Britain at this point. And he focuses on Weltpolitik, and it is quite successful. Germany holds the Berlin Conference, and they get, colonies in Africa. And one of the big ones is actually Qingdao in 1898 in China. And it's not too far from Beijing, so modern day Beijing. It was known as Peking at the time. And I have done a video on 55 days at Peking, but that's not really fully relatable to this. And Wilhelm II also begins to focus more on Sammlung politics. And that was actually brought about by Bismarck to focus nationalistic efforts, but it's never really a big part of what Bismarck does. He kind of focuses on nationalism, but not really massively. And essentially, that was, like I said, it's just to try and make more nationalist, more liking towards the Kaiser. And Wilhelm also has the support of the leagues, and these are the main leagues: the Pan-German League, the Navy League, the Agrarian League, the Imperial League, the Industrialist League, and the Army League. Most of them are pretty obvious. Now, Hohenlohe unfortunately was dismissed in 1900 over disagreements with foreign policy. And following him was Bülow, and he was Chancellor from 1900 to 1909. Now, his nickname was the Eel because he visited the Kaiser every day. However, he was also the first Chancellor that Wilhelm II really trusted. Now, Bülow began to sort of stop the extreme anti-socialist bills, but he also focused more on the extreme nationalistic side. So instead of directly going after the socialists, he made everyone nationalistic in an attempt to try and undermine the socialists. He also tried to bring about more sort of state socialism laws. However, unfortunately for him, the SPD got the credit for it. He also passed a new tariff law in 1902, which gave the money for naval expansion, which Wilhelm II wanted. And further socialist reforms, however, did occur, such as the 1904 introduction of a secret ballot. This essentially, was done by the SPD. Bülow couldn't stop it. No one could really stop it. And that doesn't make the Kaiser happy. And by 1905, Wilhelm II doesn't like Bülow because Bülow doesn't control the Reichstag and he fails to gain support for further military expansion. Bülow does gain control of the Reichstag, however, by 1907. He negotiates the Bülow bloc with the Conservatives, Agrarian League, and Liberals. And he does win the 1907 election, but he kind of fails to keep the Bülow bloc together. It really kind of just falls apart. And you'll see that a lot more in, as we look a bit further on in sort of German history. And under Bülow, the national debt increases. From 1900 to 1908, the national debt doubled, and Bülow fails to get a finance bill passed in 1909, resulting in his resignation. Now, that isn't the main reason. It's one of the reasons, but another one would be the Eulenburg affair, where sort of there's this mass controversy that a lot of people in the Camarilla are gay. There's also the Daily Telegraph affair in 1908, and he's kind of made the scapegoat for that. And finally, we get to Holweg, and Holweg was from 1909 to 1917. Now, Holweg let Wilhelm II take control of military and foreign policy. Holweg, saw what kind of caused the downfall of his predecessors, and was willing to let the Kaiser just kind of do what he wanted. He failed to change the three-stage voting system, but he did introduce universal male suffrage for anyone over the age of 21 in 1911. And in the 1912 elections, he failed to really push patriotism, and it did allow the SPD to become the largest party. And then, following that, in 1913, there was a vote of no confidence. He was seen as, ineffective, not a very good chancellor. And we got to keep in mind that the Kaiser can only dismiss the chancellor, but a vote of no confidence can kind of like force the hand of the Kaiser. It shows that he hasn't got the support of the House. And it was a victory. The vote of no confidence was a success. Everyone in the Reichstag said, let's get rid of Holweg. The Kaiser just ignores it and keeps him there. And following this, Wilhelm II essentially just started to decree, use imperial decrees, which is his power as the Kaiser, and just ignores the Reichstag. And that is the sort of main political situation of Germany up until 1913. These are the main things you need to remember. There's not really much else that occurs, and we will be doing a video later of Germany's sort of situation by 1914, then the fall of sort of Wilhelm II. But that is the main situation with the chancellor and things like that. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next video.